the progress happen? Well, many would say that it's the genius idea that drives it. Sometimes those ideas come from the throughout research, but sometimes it could be just a spontaneous eureka, a sudden realization. Take the legendary story of Isaac Newton and the falling apple, for example. A story that, whether entirely like it or not, is the perfect example of just spark. A spark that set everything in motion, that became a catalyst to the later development of science, the catalyst to a change. Though, looking at the bigger picture, we can all agree that even the most groundbreaking and brilliant ideas like this can lead to progress on its own. It's rather a result of the collective willingness to embrace the new. Take a moment to imagine. What would have happened if Newton's idea was simply not acknowledged by the public? What if society or scientists simply turned their back on his theory? Or what if someone from the other corner of the world said, "Sorry, Mr. Newton, it won't work here"? That's the paradox we face here in Uzbekistan. It's something many call bizda bo'lmaydi mindset, meaning it won't work here mindset. And it's not about denying the possibility of progress altogether, but rather a strong belief that certain ideas or innovation will simply not fit, will not work within our own culture, our traditions, and our way of life. But is that really true? Today, I want to talk about where does this resistance come from, because understanding the roots of the problem may help us make the first steps to unlock our full potential. So, let us now dive deeper into the core of the problem. But let me start with an example first. Imagine you have a box in front of you, filled with all different kinds of objects. Objects of different shape, different size, or different material. In your hand, you only have a flashlight. Without it, you cannot see. So, once you turn the flashlight on, the light will shine only one object in the box. You will see its color, you will see its shape, maybe feel the material it's made of. So, your mind will create a certain opinion, a certain perception of this object. It will be both positive or negative. Though, the other objects in the box remain in shadows. They all become identical, they all become plain to you because you cannot clearly see any of them. Your mind will complete the picture for you based on your first impression. You will think that all of the objects in the box are exact same, that they share the exact same features because they all, after all, are in the same box. You have already formed your opinion based on this single narrow glimpse. And this is exactly what happens when we face the foreign ideas. Often, we focus on only one or two cultural differences that sets us apart. And the cultural differences itself make it challenging for us to understand each other. And this excessive focus makes us define the whole concept, make us create the whole opinion, a whole perception of one's culture. Actually, a similar phenomenon was explained in psychology. The horn effect and halo effect, first suggested by the psychologist Edward Thorndike. So, the horn effect suggests that we tend to create an overall negative perception on something based on a single characteristic that we didn't like. So, when we see something we don't agree on, we might start saying, "Oh, well, probably we're not able to agree on anything at all." But this works the other way around as well. The halo effect suggests that we tend to create an overall positive perception on something based on a single characteristic that we liked. So we might even start thinking that everything about it is perfect. Though this might result in us starting to underestimate ourselves. We might start saying, "Oh, I'm probably not as good as them," or "I probably don't have what they have in them." And it's the same with our case. The reason why we're being so cautious or skeptical towards foreign ideas is because we let those one or two cultural differences define the whole concept. And it's not about someone being worse or someone being better. It's just about being different. The reason why we're being so cautious and alert to something new is because we focus on what is different rather than what is similar. Though maybe here is where we can find the solution. Maybe the opportunities lie in similarities. Let's look at one of the local problems, for example. A number of educators in Uzbekistan are quite skeptical towards the implementation of foreign methods of teaching. Why is that? Well, many of them say that those would simply not work with our students. They said that Uzbek students are not as passionate, that they're not as curious, or they don't have the same level of eagerness to learn, often comparing them to the students in China, or in America, or actually in any other country. But is that really true? My answer would be no. What sets those students apart is not a level of eagerness to learn, but rather the mentality we have behind learning. In some countries, students are simply more open. They engage in discussions, they participate in group works or debate or express their talents in school clubs. The schools there simply have a different approach. Yet here, we students are mostly used to listening. I finished school last year, and I still remember how our classes would be like. It were all lectures. We would listen to our teacher's lecture, or would absorb the information from books once we got home. And this quiet learning was often misunderstood as indifference, because it was hard to tell whether the student is actually studying or not at the first glance, especially if all of the classes are lectures. So, the truth is that we all want to succeed. We all have something we're good at. And this is something we share, despite the cultural differences. What we should do is not to say, oh, this will not work here, not with our students, but rather ask ourselves, how can we make it work for our students? What we should do is not to reject the method outright, but rather try to implement it within our own classrooms, step by step, encouraging students to speak up, to engage in the group works or presentations. Of course, the shifts might seem small or even insignificant at first, but those would be the crucial first steps to reshape the classroom mindset. So, when we begin to see small shifts, we start thinking, oh, actually the change is possible. But something still holds us back, doesn't it? Let's see. What are the other reasons behind it won't work here mindset? This one may sound quite simple for you. We fear change. But what if we look at it from a bit different angle? A number of people in Uzbekistan believe in the good old days. And it's natural because we all cling to what is familiar to us. Familiarity gives us a sense of comfort, a feeling of safety. It anchors us to something that has already been proven reliable and working, something that sometimes has even been proven in our own experience. So, some would simply suggest using the practices of the past, because if it worked for our ancestors, it should work for us now, too. Let me ask you this. If you had to choose who to trust, your parent or a complete stranger, who would that be? I'm sure many of you, including me, would instantly choose our parents. And it's natural because we have known our parents for years. We have heard their voice. We know what they value. They might not always be right, but they make us feel safe. The stranger's advice might be better. They might be even a professional, an expert in his field, but we will still hesitate sometimes. We will unconsciously question their motives. We will unconsciously question their understanding of our situation. And it's not because they are not right. It's because they are unknown to us. So, that's why some people are looking for the answers in the past rather than trying to search for the new solutions. And it's not because they don't want to change, but rather because they're afraid of the risk. Trying something new always has its certain risks, and sometimes we think that maybe the outcome of taking those might result in us losing something. Maybe we don't simply believe that the innovation from a different country will not work here just because of the environmental differences, but we fear that it will do more harm than good, that it will share the stability we have or take away something that makes us who we are. We should understand that what we now see as reliable, proven by time, was once new for our ancestors. They had to explore. They had to experiment with untested. What we now see as a tradition was once an innovation for our ancestors. So, what we should do is not to focus on the choice between old or new, but rather on understanding that today's new can become tomorrow's trusted. So, how does the progress happen? It's not just a spark of a brilliant idea. It's about us to embrace it together. It's about us to be willing to see beyond our differences. It's about us to see innovation and tradition as allies, not rivals. Of course, the change will require time. Of course, we might not see the results immediately, but that's a part of a journey. Every small shift, every small change will become a part of something bigger in the future. So, it's time for us not to say, it won't work here, but rather ask ourselves, how can we make it work? Thank you.